My next question, Pastor Steve, is from Sean, and he says, what are the best evidences of the resurrection of Jesus for a witness to a non-believer, biblical and extra-biblical?
Well, the best evidences for the resurrection biblically are the guys who said that they saw Jesus. And so you have each one of the apostles give a testimony that Jesus rose from the dead. And each one of these guys ended up going to their deaths themselves, except for John the apostle. Every single one of these guys, so for example, Andrew was crucified. Thomas was stuck in the side with a spear. Peter was crucified upside down. And you can go through every single one of these guys, and each one of them went to their deaths claiming that Jesus rose from the dead. In fact, each one of them, if they would have said that they didn't believe that Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead, that he wasn't actually the Messiah, and so on, they wouldn't have gone to their deaths. And so one of the things that you can know about people is that people will die for a lie, right? And so there's all kinds of people who've been deceived about something, and they will go to their deaths when they believe a lie, but they won't go to their deaths when they know something to be a lie. And so out of all 12 of these guys, and I'm talking about Matthias too, when you get to the book of Acts, out of all 12 of these guys, every single one of them went to their deaths. And if these guys had made it up, or it hadn't happened, or anything like that, then it wouldn't have happened. You would have had probably all of them folding and saving their lives instead of dying for a lie. And so you have that. Then on top of that, you've got Paul the Apostle. And that's one that's just kind of really a clincher, because when you look at Paul's history, he was first called Saul of Tarsus, and he was actually a guy who was involved in persecuting the Christian church. He put Christians to death. And so he was on his way to Damascus, and on the road to Damascus, he ends up having an experience with Christ that was witnessed by the men who were with him. He has this experience with Christ, and his life turns around to the point where he becomes, admittedly the most prolific of all the gospel, or of all the writers of the New Testament. He wrote fully a third of the New Testament himself. And so, and actually most of the books of the New Testament. And so you have to explain away Paul. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then why did all these guys go to their deaths? And if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then how do you explain Paul the Apostle? And those are actually the best evidences that you have. Another thing that, when you're looking at this whole thing, the resurrection can be disproved in the first century really easily. All they have to do is go get the body of Jesus and parade it around town. And they weren't able to do that. Right. And so when you look at the resurrection stories, first thing that you have is you have a situation where the Pharisees and the chief priests and the scribes believe Jesus' witness about the resurrection more than the apostles do, because the apostles run away scared, and what the religious leaders do is they go to Pilate and ask for a guard to be on the tomb, because they don't want the disciples to come and steal away the body. And so they put a Roman guard in front of the tomb. And one of the things that's really cool about that issue there is that if it had been any other guard, if it had been a temple guard or whatever, you don't have the stringent rules that the Romans had. So for example, if you were a Roman soldier, any mission that you were put on, if you ran away, they would put you to death. And it's the reason that when the Roman soldiers are frightened by the angel that sits on the stone when they roll away the tomb, or when the angel rolls away the stone, the reason that they go to the chief priests and not to Pilate is because Pilate would have had them executed. And so what they're doing is they're having the chief priests intercede for them so that they can keep their lives. They know that they've abandoned their post. They know that they're worthy of the death penalty as far as the Roman rules go. And so you have that. Plus they're Roman soldiers. These guys, they're not a bunch of pansies.
No.
These are guys who will walk up to you, grab you by your collar, and shove a 2-foot long knife through your gut.
You didn't mess with the Roman soldiers.
Yeah, they'll kill you and look in your eyes as you're going down and dying. And so these are not wimps by any means, and yet they're a witness to the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. And so you have that. So you have the soldiers at the tomb. You have to explain those guys away. How did the disciples? Because they have to run for some reason. So Peter got into an angel costume and sat on the stone and scared these guys. How do you explain that?
Yeah.
And
silliness.
Yeah, obviously. And so then on top of it, you have a number of witnesses to the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, it says that Jesus appeared to over 500 people at once. And so he didn't just appear to single people at different times. He did do that. He appeared to Mary, for example. He appeared to Peter. He appeared to his brother James, who was not a believer before that point. And each one of them were believers. James was not. He became a believer, and each one of them went to their deaths following Christ. And so those are single appearances. But then he appeared to the 12, and then he appeared to over 500 people at once. And so you can't sit there and say that this is something that's just like a mass hallucination or something like that. He appears in different instances. He makes sure that they know that he was there, that he leaves the marks of his presence. At one point, he appears to the disciples, and he says, "Do you have any food here?" And so they had some fish and a honeycomb. And so he said, "Give them to me," and he took a bite out of each one. And so Jesus leaves the room, and now you got bite marks. And again, you have that situation. It would be, again, a really easy thing to disprove the resurrection of Christ in the first century if they could. Right. And the fact is that they couldn't. So you could parade the body, you could intimidate people into giving up their faith, and that wasn't something that worked, and so on and so forth. And there was just no getting past this stuff. And so it's something that's solid in Scripture, and it's a good testimony of these things. As far as the rest of the world goes, we don't have like direct evidence of like the Roman authorities, for example, saying that Jesus rose from the dead. But we do have commands. There's one that I just read about not too long ago. We have histories of commands around the area of Galilee that at the time of Jesus that makes it a capital offense to rob tombs.
Really?
Yeah, to rob tombs, basically, to steal bodies from tombs. And it looks like it was in response to the resurrection of Jesus. And so that's kind of interesting stuff. But again, those are the, if you're going to explain away, if you're going to get rid of Christianity, you have to explain away the resurrection appearances.
Right.
And there's just no way to do that. These people touched him, they heard him, they felt him. One of the things that I do on Easter, we have a somewhat large church, and not everybody has actually been up next to me. And so I have people raise their hands if they've never touched me, if I've never shaken their hands or something. And so we always have a number of people who've never touched me, and I'll have them raise their hands if they've never seen me eat anything or move, or leave evidence that I've been in a place. And then at the end of that whole thing, I let them know that there's more evidence for the resurrection of Jesus than they have for my reality at that point. And obviously they could come up and touch me if they wanted to. But again, that's the kind of evidence that the Bible talks about in these instances. They saw him, they heard him, They probably smelled him. I don't know what a resurrected person smells like, but they probably smelled really sweet, probably.
Yeah.
They smelled him. They touched him. He manipulated the environment so that they knew that he was there. He passes all the evidences of a real life person in the room. And again, you have to have something that was significant enough in the lives of these guys to turn them from a group of people who were hiding in rooms from the authorities to guys who would go up a month and a half later and step into the temple and accuse the authorities of killing off the Messiah. Mm-hmm. And then all the miracles that went along with the early church. And so, yeah, there's good evidence.
Yeah, and the miracles are awesome too, because you have in that whole thing 12 disciples, mm-hmm. main guys, and some other guys. And this whole message, we still have it today, against the Romans
right.
and the Jews. The whole world does not want this to get out.
Right.
And that group, because of the resurrection,
yep.
turned it upside down.
Yep.
And we still have it today.
Exactly.
Pretty awesome. All right. I forgot who... Sean. Thanks, Sean, for asking the question. Appreciate it, man.